TV Trash. Well, it looks like the impossible happens, which means it's time for me to make good on a vow I made some time ago. For those who haven't been online in the last few months, the entire geek universe has been squeeing itself hoarse over the fact that Don Bluth is getting back into the business. Thanks to his and longtime partner Gary Goldman's successful Indiegogo campaign to fund an animated movie adaptation of the legendary video game Dragon's Lair. Originally released in 1983, this was one of the first full-motion games ever created, using Bluth's cinema-level animation to create nothing a video game had ever featured before. Despite the overly used and outright cliched objective of knight must save princess from dragon, it could be one of the poster children for 80s video games that consumed many a kid's quarters at the arcade. Because despite the game itself able to be completed in only about 12 minutes, it really took months due to the need to learn perfect timing and memory to advance past each individual scene. It remains one of the legendary video game franchises, as the original spawned 2 direct sequels, a computer spin-off, an infamously bad NES adaptation, and yes, an animated TV series. The TV show was part of ABC's Saturday morning lineup in 1984 and actually shared the same time slot as the second half hour of Saturday Supercade on CBS. Which means that if memory serves me correctly, the cartoons based on Dragon's Lair and Bluth's other FMV game Space Ace aired at the same time. I made a promise to my colleagues that if Bluth got the funding for his movie, I would in turn review the animated TV series. So let's jump in and see how the Dragon's Lair show compares to all of the other infamous video games adaptations we've seen here on TV Trash. The first episode begins well enough with a traditional storybook-style narration where we're introduced to our hero Dirk the Daring and his impossible task of figuring out what to get for Princess Daphne's birthday.
I have the greatest gift of all for Princess Daphne. Nothing you could get her would even come close.
Dirk, were you and Sir Hubert talking about birthday presents by any chance?
Well...
Ah yes, the question that has inspired many an adventurer. What do you get for the girl who has everything?
I shall undertake a quest. A quest to find you the greatest birthday gift ever.
Why do I get the feeling this isn't going to be an inspiration for Roberta Williams? So in the first 2 minutes of the first episode, we see that our hero is not only majorly whipped by his princess, but he has to deal with a bully among the royal knights while constantly needing advice from his squire Timothy to be able to do anything. Meanwhile, all this is being watched over by the dragon himself, who has been given the name Singe for this show, and decides to use Dirk's little predicament to plant a trap in the castle. Who knows why a huge fire-breathing lizard can't just lay siege to the castle himself is anyone's guess, but I'll just blame it on him being lazy. I mean, it's not like we don't know of any real-life big bloated monsters who gained wealth and power from other people's work. You promised no Donald Trump jokes!
Take the golden falcon and make sure Dirk finds it.
So Singe's goons plant a note in the castle for Dirk telling him where they hid the dragon's golden falcon, and he just takes on the quest without questioning where it came from because he's kind of foolhardy and stupid like that.
Guess I'll just have to go through that door. Getting goon!
And then Dirk draws his sword on the goons, only to step back and have his horse Bertram help slam the door so they just run into it. Because cartoon of the 80s, no violence allowed. And following one cheap shout out to the actual game, Dirk finding the Falcon and somehow making it back up that shaft with no explanation how, they bring the Falcon to Daphne's party, where it turns out that maybe they didn't need that much work to compete with Sir Blunt.
Sir Hubert, I don't know what to say.
And that one's still only half the size of the one he keeps in his coin purse. Naturally, Daphne loves Dirk's present more, but before she could show her affection in a way that would have Yakko saying goodnight, everybody,
Come to life, spring into flight, deliver the princess to me tonight.
Gotcha, bird!
Get me down from here!
man, this is the second worst princess birthday party we've been to outside of Aurora's.
I'll go alone. Besides, it'll be safer for just one night to brave the dragon's lair. Giddy goons! Ready to have at 'em?
Have at whom, Master Dirk? Huh?
With giddy goons advancing from one direction and with mudmen coming from the other, what would you do?
Yeah, this was a running gag with the show in that right at each break, Dirk would be put in some sort of predicament, and this narrator would ask the audience what their choice would be. Then they'd come back from break to show which option would have failed and send Dirk to a comical death before he ends up making the right choice. And people think the WWE's fan balloting to determine the next match is rigged. Dirk finds out where Singe's hideout is thanks to more goons posing as Jawas, and admittedly the third act of the episode does come off a lot like the actual game.
Yeah.
Well, except for the part where instead of outright killing Singe, they get him to melt his own gold and get stuck in the goo, and then when he gives pursuit anyway, they trick him into getting his fat ass stuck in Stonehenge. Ah, all the forced plot devices in the 80s to make the characters come up with a non-violent solution. Come to think of it, this show is starting to seem more and more like a Roberta Williams adventure game. Oh, and the episode has to end with Dirk finding a replacement gift for Daphne because apparently saving her life wasn't enough. Glad to see their priorities are in order. Now, believe it or not, few if any of the remaining episodes actually involve Dirk having to save Daphne. As if the writers actually knew that would get rather, tedious over time. In fact, a lot of them involve Dirk having to help someone else, like Timothy or the King, and Daphne actually finds some way to tag along with Dirk because she wants to prove she's not just some pretty fool and all that.
Looking for a squire, brave knights?
Why are you dressed like that?
Well, you need a squire, don't you?
But, oh, let's go.
And I have to say, I'm really impressed by this portrayal. Let's face it, Princess Daphne in the games was kind of portrayed as a bimbo, which probably didn't help that the game developers, having no budget to hire models to design the characters after, developed Daphne after Playboy cover girls. For the cartoon, they definitely had to give her a more conservative dress to satisfy the censors, but they went much further in giving her an actual personality as someone who wants to prove herself to both Dirk and her father.
I should have known you'd show up.
Of course, your sword's ruined. Here, take this one.
Thank you, Princess.
In fact, there was one episode where she learns magic spells and is able to imprison Singe on her own. Looking back at both this and the Space Ace cartoon, I don't think we've given enough credit to 80s cartoons for showing female characters in a much more proactive light like this. I wasn't old enough to remember if there was such an outcry for stronger female characters back in the 80s, especially since we didn't have the internet and social media for everyone to scream on. But credit should be given to Ruby Spears for developing characters like this incarnation of Daphne. Also, Daphne gets the standard one-parent trope that so many princesses are saddled with, as we will sadly not get to meet her mother until the video game sequel.
Kidnapped? By Daphne kidnapped again? Idiot! Don't cough! You better find my daughter!
Yeah, and you thought the in-laws were always a pain in the ass on sitcoms. Wait a minute. Something just occurred to me. We have a foolhardy, egotistical, and somewhat doofus of a hero that protects a kingdom with a headstrong princess always getting involved with his adventures, whose father the king is somewhat absent-minded, and they fight an arch-villain with a bunch of buffoonish lackeys. Why does this seem so familiar? As if I've seen it somewhere before. Yeah, there are quite a few similarities to what the Legend of Zelda series would become 5 years later. Heck, in the later episodes where Dirk actually does fight off monsters like the goons with that sword of his, yeah, they just disappear in this show as well. Though we never get to see where Singe keeps his evil jar. There is one thing the show does better than the Zelda cartoon, and that's introduce other antagonists. Singe actually appears in less than half of the 13 episodes, while other villains become the main foe for all the rest. Granted, a lot of them were still creatures that appeared in the game, such as the Lizard King and the Phantom Knight, but hey, they did get their day in the limelight here. All of this was something the TV writers could afford to try, because for being an FMV game, Dragon's Lair was still kind of lax in the story department. I've seen LPs of the game, and it was a bit disappointing to watch, to be perfectly honest. There are a lot of mirrored duplicate scenes in the game, and few if any dialogue is there until the final battle. They actually did a lot better with Space Ace a year later, but yeah, they were definitely raw with the original Dragon's Lair game. Yeah, it wasn't completely their fault given the limited budget and the fact that it was the first of its time, but it was pretty much just the original Super Mario Bros. With full animation used as far as giving the characters personality went. The show took advantage of the episodic format to create new adventures, many of them involving Dirk acting like a PC from an MMO game, going on quests because he's bored or some crap, and basically disturbing other evil forces like the Snow Witch here. Yeah, it looks like Ruby Spears managed to adapt the Snow Queen 20 years before Disney did. Though not quite with the same traumatic backstory. And in this episode, she actually gets a pretty gruesome death for an 80s cartoon.
Pretty good, thanks to my salt solution.
Though I have to say the show's final episode really did hit pretty hard in the lame department. It started with Dirk and Blunt going after Singe's magic sword from the game that is stated even here as the only thing that can harm the dragon. Then it takes a left turn into where this ripoff of Puck from Shakespeare lore gives Blunt the ability to wish for anything, and it's the standard be careful what you wish for plot, as Blunt lets it go to his head and Singe uses it to make Blunt king, with Singe acting as Worm Tongue. Puck helps Dirk and company reverse all the wishes, but this still leaves Singe at their castle, and despite it previously being established that they can't hurt him without the magic sword, and thus he could roast them on their own turf, he escapes with the goons in a hot air balloon. Apparently Singe is another name for chicken in the dragon world.
You haven't seen the last of me!
Still, despite that being the end since the show didn't get a second season, this might be one of the better video game adaptations I've seen. The show extended on the characters from the game in ways that were believable and actually quite a bit progressive from the time it came out. The episode's storylines didn't seem repetitive and helped create a whole world for the characters to exist in. Yeah, there could be some goofy moments and times where they clearly had to get around censors like so many shows of the time, but overall it found a way to bring the characters and setting to life in a way that still stayed as close to the source material as possible and actually taking it further. It's one show that I'll say Time Warner didn't waste time in releasing for the archive collection, and it can be a decent addition for anyone looking for memorabilia on this and other game franchises. I'm actually hoping that Bluth and Goldman will take the setting and personalities of the characters from this show into consideration when their movie goes into development. And hey, as long as they don't have Dirk screaming, "Excuse me, princess," that's gotta be a step up from some other things, right? See you next time on TV Trash.